The evening rush hour painted New York in its usual hues. Honking cars, tired footsteps, and trains screeching into platforms. Deep underground, the subway rumbled along the tracks, its fluorescent lights flickering slightly as the 6:15 p.m. train pulled out of Lexington Avenue. Among the crowd sat Mrs. Agnes Harper, a retired librarian in her 70s, clutching a cloth handbag to her chest. Her white curls peeked from beneath a knitted purple hat, and her eyes, though tired, still held the softness of a kind soul. She took the same route every Thursday to visit her daughter uptown. The subway was her little routine, quiet, dependable. Across from her, seemingly dozing, was Jack Rayner, mid-30s, worn leather jacket, face half-shadowed under a Yankees cap. No one paid him much attention. He looked like any other tired commuter, but he wasn't. The train screeched into the next station. The doors opened. A young man with a hooded sweatshirt and restless eyes stepped in. Troy, no older than 21, had a twitch in his jaw and tension in his fists. He looked around the carriage, scanning. His eyes settled on the old woman, vulnerable, alone and unaware. The train jolted into motion again. As passengers settled, a current of unease quietly swept the space. Jack's eyes flicked up from under his cap, watching Troy closely. Something about his walk, his gaze, his posture. A sense of stillness came just before the storm. What no one in that car knew was this: tonight's ordinary ride was about to turn into a moment no one would ever forget. Troy shifted his weight, sliding closer to the center pole. His eyes barely blinked, locked onto Agnes. He didn't look around nervously. He was bold, practiced. He'd done this before: pickpocketing, snatching, intimidation. The subway was his hunting ground. The wheels clattered beneath them, a cold echo in the dim train. He watched her with a predator's patience, inching closer as if adjusting his footing. Agnes remained unaware. She was humming something soft, lost in her thoughts. The bag stayed clutched between her knees. Across from them, Jack Rayner's fingers tapped rhythmically against his thigh. He wasn't reading a book, scrolling his phone, or looking away like the others. His eyes were open now, cold, focused. He saw everything. He saw the slight bulge in Troy's hoodie, the shift of his shoulders, the way he avoided eye contact with men but stared women down. But Jack didn't move. Not yet. Troy glanced up briefly and noticed Jack, just a guy in a ball cap, nothing to worry about. Still, something made him pause, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He turned back to Agnes. The next station was 5 minutes away. In that time, he would make his move, and he did. Quick as a snap, Troy lunged forward and grabbed the strap of Agnes's bag. She let out a shocked gasp, clutching it with both hands. "Let go, lady," he snarled. Agnes screamed. Gasps erupted from passengers, but no one moved, except Jack. He slowly stood up, not fast, not dramatic, but deliberately. He took one step forward, and then another. Troy didn't even notice, but he was about to. Troy yanked again, wrenching the bag from Agnes's hands. She shrieked, stumbling back in her seat, trembling, both hands in the air. "Please, no," she cried. "Shut up!" Troy barked, holding the bag tightly. The subway train rocked as it raced ahead, indifferent to the chaos inside. Most passengers remained frozen, eyes wide, some pulling out phones, others too afraid to move. Jack kept walking, calm, controlled. He wasn't running, shouting, or flailing. His hands were down by his sides, but his steps, measured, purposeful, cut through the air like a knife. Troy noticed him now. "Back off, man!" he warned, stepping back and holding the bag like a shield. Jack didn't respond. Instead, he spoke for the first time. "That's not yours." His voice was low, flat, emotionless. Troy squinted. "You deaf?" The thug raised a clenched fist, threatening. "You want a piece of this too, old man?" Jack stopped 2 feet away, and for a second, time stood still. Agnes stared, breathless. Her heart pounded in her chest. Passengers watched, unsure if this was bravery or foolishness. Jack looked down at the bag, then at Agnes, then back to Troy. And when he finally raised his eyes fully, there was something different about them. Like steel, that was the last second Troy had to rethink everything, but he didn't take it, and Jack moved, not with hesitation, not with mercy, but with purpose. In a blur of motion, Jack stepped inside Troy's space. One hand grabbed the wrist holding the bag. The other jabbed straight into Troy's throat, soft but devastating. It wasn't a wild punch, it was surgical. Troy gagged, stumbling backward, both hands now raised in defense. But Jack didn't stop. He swept his leg behind Troy's knee, sending the thug crashing to the floor with a loud thud. The bag flew from his hands and skidded across the floor, landing near Agnes's feet. Gasps rippled through the subway car. A woman covered her mouth. A man pulled out his phone but didn't press record. He just watched. Jack knelt beside Troy and twisted his arm behind his back in one fluid move. No unnecessary force, no showboating, just clean, efficient control. Troy struggled, breathless. "Who the hell are you?" he wheezed. Jack leaned in close. "Someone you picked the wrong train with." Agnes still sat frozen, hands over her heart. A tear rolled down her cheek, not from pain, but relief. Passengers began to stir, murmuring among themselves. Jack stood slowly, still holding Troy down with a knee. His cap had shifted, revealing a faint scar above his left eyebrow. Someone whispered, "He's military." Another voice said, "No." That was too smooth. Maybe FBI. Jack didn't correct them. He just waited. The next station was seconds away, and help was coming. As the train began to slow down, sirens could be heard faintly above, an unusual sound in the subway depths. Someone had pressed the emergency intercom earlier. Backup was already on its way. But Jack's eyes weren't on the doors. They were on Troy, not in anger, but in silence. Memories flickered behind those eyes. Dusty villages, night missions, innocent people in danger, predators thinking they owned the world. He had faced worse than Troy before. Men with weapons, men with no mercy. But this was personal, because once, a long time ago, Jack's own mother had been robbed on a subway, and no one had helped her. Not one soul. He remembered the helplessness he felt, the rage, the guilt of being too far away too late. So tonight, he didn't hesitate. Not again. Troy whimpered now. The bravado was gone. His hoodie was damp with sweat. The pain in his arm was sharp, but not enough to distract from the growing fear inside. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he muttered. Jack didn't respond. The train screeched to a stop. The doors hissed open. 3 NYPD officers rushed in, one hand on tasers, the other on radios, until they saw the scene. Jack raised his hands and stepped back. "He tried to rob that woman," he said simply. Agnes nodded, still trembling. "He saved my life." The cops moved in, cuffing Troy with practiced speed. One officer gave Jack a long look. "Name?" Jack hesitated. "Just Jack." Then he turned to leave, already walking toward the opposite doors. He didn't wait for applause. Jack stepped off the train, boots meeting the platform with quiet certainty. Behind him, the chaos unraveled. Officers escorting Troy in cuffs, passengers buzzing in awe, Agnes being comforted by a young woman. But Jack didn't look back. His coat billowed slightly as he walked. One of the younger officers watched him go and whispered, "Who was that guy?" No one knew. Jack vanished into the crowd, swallowed by the maze of tiled walls and echoing footsteps. He wasn't looking for praise. He didn't need headlines. For him, it was simple. He had been there when it mattered. Above ground, twilight painted the city in soft orange hues. Jack emerged onto the street, the cold breeze brushing his face. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn photograph, a woman in a hospital gown, smiling weakly. His mother, gone now. But her memory had brought him to this very moment. As he pocketed the photo, his phone buzzed. A message flashed, mission cleared. "We'll debrief at 0900. Jack sighed. He had been trying to live quietly, off-duty, just another man in a city of millions. But the world didn't always give you peace. Sometimes it gave you a train. And a choice. Tonight, he made the right one. And somewhere behind him, a woman's life was still intact, because of it. Back inside the subway, Agnes remained seated for a long while. A female officer knelt beside her, gently handing back her handbag. "You're safe now, ma'am." Agnes clutched the bag, but stared toward the open door Jack had exited through. Who was that man? The officer shrugged. "Not one of us. Just someone." Passengers began murmuring among themselves. He moved like he was trained. "I think he used to be in the service. Whatever he wasn't ordinary." Agnes gave a soft chuckle despite her shaken nerves. "He was my guardian angel tonight." Another man nodded. "It's strange. In this city, people barely look up from their phones. And yet, that guy saw it all coming." The officer nodded. "Sometimes the right person's just in the right place." The train conductor announced a delay, and the crowd slowly began to exit. But the story would spread. Word of the mysterious man who took down a thug with no badge, no backup, and no hesitation. Outside, the station buzzed with evening commuters, unaware of the small miracle that had just occurred. But for those on that train, they'd remember. Agnes especially would never forget the steely eyes behind that baseball cap. Not because of what he did, but because of how he did it. No anger, no violence for violence's sake, just purpose and restraint. Back in his small apartment on the city's edge, Jack peeled off his jacket and dropped it over a chair. The room was plain. Military bedroll, old punching bag in the corner, a small TV with the sound off. The walls bore only one framed item, his discharge papers. Sergeant Jack Rayner, U.S. Marine Corps, Special Forces, retired. He poured a glass of water and stared out the window. City lights flickered below, but Jack's mind wasn't on the skyline. He remembered Troy's face, young, angry, afraid. A kid on a dark path. Jack had seen too many just like him in war-torn villages, abandoned towns and broken cities. Some were too far gone, but some just needed one moment to break the cycle. Was tonight that moment? Or would Troy just end up back on the streets? Jack didn't know, but he knew he'd given him a chance. His phone vibrated again. A message from someone named Cooper read, "HQ wants you back in the field. You've been spotted." Jack stared at it. He typed a response. Not yet. He wasn't ready to return. Not while people like Agnes still rode alone. Not while cowards still preyed on the vulnerable. He wasn't chasing violence, but if it found him again, he'd be ready. By morning, the story had made it online. Mystery man saves elderly woman on NYC subway who was the subway guardian. Footage leaks of former soldier subduing mugger. Though no one had filmed the full takedown, a grainy clip showed Jack standing calmly over Troy, motionless, while the train slowed into the station. The internet took notice. Some called him a hero, others a vigilante, but most just asked, "Who is he?" Detectives reviewed security footage from the platform, trying to identify Jack, but he had slipped through the cracks like smoke. No name, no ID. Agnes was interviewed by a local paper. She described him as quiet, calm and kind. He didn't say much, but he looked me in the eye after it all, and I just knew someone had raised him right. The city was curious. Some were inspired, some afraid, but Jack didn't care. He wasn't online, he didn't read the headlines. He was back underground, taking another train, scanning faces not for fame, but for danger. And somewhere, far from his reach, Troy sat in a cold interrogation room. He wasn't talking, but he was thinking. About the man who could have broken him, and chose not to. Agnes sat in her daughter's living room, sipping tea, her hands still trembling slightly. "He didn't even tell me his name," she whispered. Her daughter Maria held her hand. "Mom, I'm just glad you're okay." Agnes nodded, but her heart was stirred. She wasn't just thinking about the fear, she was thinking about the strength. Jack's strength. That night awakened something in her. For the first time in years, she felt like speaking out. Not just about what happened, but about how the city had changed. How people needed to look up again, to care again. 2 days later, Agnes went to a local community meeting. There she stood and shared her story. Her voice cracked, but she spoke with power. "There are bad people," she said, "but there are good ones too, and sometimes they sit across from you on the subway." The room applauded. She didn't know where Jack was, but her words would echo back to him one day. Maybe someone in that room would tell the story. Maybe someone else would choose to act when the time came. In the holding cell, Troy sat on the edge of the bench, eyes vacant. He hadn't spoken in hours. A detective leaned against the wall. "You've got priors, assault, theft. You're looking at years." Troy didn't flinch. "Why'd you go after that lady?" Still silence. The detective sighed. "You're lucky. That guy who stopped you, he could have crushed you, could have ruined your arm, but he didn't." Troy finally looked up. "Why?" The detective shrugged. "Maybe he's better than you." Troy swallowed hard. No one had ever shown him mercy before. That punch to the throat was brutal, but the fact that Jack stopped, that haunted him. Something shifted in Troy's face. Regret, doubt, a sliver of something real. Only time would tell. Days later, Jack received a letter. No return address. Inside was a printed news clipping, "Elderly woman saved in subway attack." On the bottom, someone had scribbled, "There are more out there. Still watching. Stay sharp." Jack smirked. He knew the handwriting. It was Cooper. He hadn't been forgotten. There were others, men like him scattered across the country, ex-intel, off-grid, waiting for the right moments. Jack folded the letter, tucked it into a book, and grabbed his jacket. He wasn't alone, and he wasn't done. Weeks later, Agnes boarded the same train, same route, same hour, same seat. But this time, her eyes scanned the car. She saw people differently now. She smiled more, sat straighter, and she noticed something else too. People were looking up, watching out for one another, just a little more. Maybe it was the story. Maybe it was hope. Maybe Jack had changed more than just that one night. Somewhere in the city, Jack sat in another subway car. Same worn jacket, same Yankees cap, eyes half closed. Across from him, a mother calmed her child. A teenager helped an old man with a cane. A nervous boy clutched his backpack. Jack watched it all, not because he expected trouble, but because he was ready for it, and if it came again like it did that night, he'd be the one sitting across, waiting and acting, when it mattered most.